Yeah. And how did you end up in New Zealand?
Well, about 45 years ago, curiosity, and 5 years after that, permanently.
Fantastic. Pleased to have you here.
So it's about 42 years altogether.
If you'd said about earlier, I would have worked out that it was Canada and not the US. Well done, Tim. Hey, I've got this album, Dope Lemon's Golden Wolf. It's a really critically acclaimed album, and it's from this part of the world as well, your new home, Australasia, I should say. So we'll send it your way.
Yeah, no, that track you played earlier sounded intriguing, so I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll play the title track before 4 p.m. so everyone else can hear it as well. Well done to Tim. He takes it away. They're all artists. Artists are all named for USA cities. Mary Holm is here. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jesse.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just listening to the man who was just talking. I spent 4 years very near Detroit in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Yeah.
And you're talking about what was north of Detroit and what south of Detroit. I think I'm right in saying it's the only part of the Canadian-US border where there's actually some of Canada due south of some of America.
Yes.
Right near Detroit.
Yeah, I think I did a little quiz question on that back in the day. Let me see if I can...
It's a trivia.
Yeah, it is.
It's
Detroit.
Yeah.
So Detroit is south of Toronto. But if you went sort of a little bit east and a little bit south, you'd still be in Canada. Yes, you're right.
There's a little bit of Ontario that kind of sneaks around south of
Yes, near Niagara
Michigan.
Falls, isn't it?
Yes, well, quite near. Oh, no, that's another whole lake away.
No, look, it's here on my computer. I'm looking at a map. They're right next to each other. Yeah. What's that, about 300 kilometres or something?
Some fairly big lakes around there, Jesse. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
You've been taking a look at the annual KiwiSaver statement.
Yes, yeah, because it's sort of statement season again. Well, by now, everybody should definitely have received their KiwiSaver statement, and I imagine a heck of a lot of them barely look at it. But basically what they're giving you is...
It's nice to look at it to remind yourself you've got some assets.
Well, yes, yeah. And
is it the tax investor certificate or that's something else?
No, it shouldn't be that. It should be a KiwiSaver statement.
Okay.
Tells you how much went in and how much went out of your account in the year ending March 31st. And the thing that I think is really quite a neat feature, which has only been going for a few years, is roughly how much you're likely to have at 65. And that's assuming that you, of course, continue to contribute at the pace you're contributing, and that you're can stay in the same risk level you're at and all of that. But it certainly gives people a rough idea, and then it translates into the weekly spending until you're 90 from 65 to 90. So it's saying if if at 65 you've got 100,000, that'll be X dollars a week you can spend, and that money will last until you're 90. And by the way, those weekly amounts don't include New Zealand Super. So it's giving people, a feel for where they're at. And by the way, those amounts are adjusted for inflation. So keep that in mind when it says, especially for people who are really young, if it says you'll have $100 a week to spend from 65 on, that's what $100 would buy now, not what $100 will buy by the time they're 65, which will be a heck of a lot less, probably. But so...
I can't actually see my projections on my one, but maybe they've just dropped off somewhere.
That shouldn't be happening. That's interesting.
Yeah,
you might want to email your provider.
It says on the email that the projections are in there, but I can't see them anywhere. Can you?
Oh, I can't read from here what you're writing.
Fair enough.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, you go ahead.
Yes. So, if you want to get a better feel for how much you're going to have in your KiwiSaver account when you retire, and you might, for example, be planning to retire earlier or later than 65, you can go into the KiwiSaver calculator on Sorted. It's not the KiwiSaver Fund Finder, it's the KiwiSaver calculator. It's called on sorted.org.nz. And you can put in there that you're planning to take money out to buy a first home, which of course a lot of the younger people are at least hoping to do. So that's a good tool for getting a rough idea of where, but a better idea perhaps than the one you get in your KiwiSaver statement. They're all pretty vague, of course. Because they've got to make all sorts of assumptions about how much the returns in your fund and all sorts of stuff like that. But it's a good idea to get a rough idea of where you stand. Another thing for people to do is think about the risk level you're at. The interesting stuff came out of FMA recently saying that a lot more people have increased their risk level in KiwiSaver.
Your message is getting through,
Well,
Mary.
yeah, maybe it is, Jesse. It's partly because the default KiwiSaver funds, which used to be low risk, have been moved to sort of medium risk, and that, of course, would increase average risk levels. But they're saying that it's not just that. So yes, people who have A, got a long time before they're going to be spending the money, and B, can tolerate the ups and downs, and we hope more and more people are doing that. It really is a good idea to consider moving up to a higher risk level. And you can do that on that KiwiSaver calculator. You can put through a higher risk level and see how much then you're likely to have in retirement, which can be quite encouraging. I also suggest people have a good hard look at fees. In your statement, it'll be telling you how much you've paid in fees during the year. And to do a little bit of research on that one, use the KiwiSaver Fund Finder on Sorted, which is a different tool. There's, I think, 3 different KiwiSaver tools on Sorted website. So the Fund Finder is the one that will help you have a look at not just how much you're paying a year, but it projects how much you're likely to pay up until 65 in fees, and those can be quite big numbers, especially for young people, and show you how much more or less you'd pay if you changed to a different provider. So, yeah, so I was just talking about changing risk level, considering increasing your risk level, in particular if you've got a long time to go before you're likely to be spending the money, and looking at your fees using the KiwiSaver Fund Finder tool on Sorted. If in going through this whole process you think I'd really quite like to have a bit more at retirement than that, then you can consider just putting in more. If you're an employee, you can go from 3% to 4, 6, 8 or 10%, or you can just set up any other amount you want to put in on a regular basis, set that up directly with your provider. And of course, if you're not an employee, you can just change the amount that's going in directly from your bank account to the provider. So that makes it easy. But Jesse, we received an email. It was about a year ago from a man called Paul about KiwiSaver annual statements. And at the time, there was a whole lot of other stuff we were talking about, and then it got a bit lacking in freshness. So I thought, let's bring it back this year because it's still relevant. So do you want to read?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Could Mary, this comes from Paul, could Mary please point out to listeners that the increase in their KiwiSaver balances is not just the increase in their investments, but also the increase in the amount they have contributed. So an increase that looks like $5,000 in a year would be less, obviously, if they'd been contributing $50 a week, around $2,500 a year. It's a little unclear in the statements I receive, which show my balance in my default conservative fund has a nice increase year on year, until I deduct the amount I added.
Yes, fair enough point, Paul. You're absolutely right. It sort of proofs KiwiSaver against looking too bad because, even if the markets have been down, if the person is regularly contributing, that's going to help the growth of your balance during the year, and it's simply money you've put in. I would note that Paul says he's in a conservative account, and that, so you don't tend to get very high returns in those sort of funds, and he might want to consider
a couple of percent a year, right?
Yeah, yes, is the sort of typical after fees and tax. So, but it is a fair enough point. To some extent, the increase in your value over the year has been just thanks to you putting in regular amounts. And then he had another point, I think, in his.
Yeah. Also, Mary, what is the PIE tax I pay? I thought KiwiSaver was tax-free capital gain. If I'm paying in money that's already been taxed and it's getting taxed again to pay for somebody else's pies, then I'm grumpy.
Yes.
It's a pie tax, you see.
This is Paul, the grumpy listener. So Paul says, if I'm paying in money that's already been taxed, it shouldn't be getting taxed again, and it isn't. The contributions that you put in to KiwiSaver are not taxed again, but you are taxed on some of the returns you make in KiwiSaver, and returns being interest and gains and value in the investment. So to look a bit more specifically at the tax in KiwiSaver and on all PIEs, which stands for Portfolio Investment Entities, basically they're managed funds. Whether you're in a KiwiSaver managed fund or outside a KiwiSaver fund, they're pretty much all PIEs, and they get slightly cheaper tax for most people. Nobody pays more tax in a pie than they would elsewhere, and quite a lot of people, especially actually higher income people, pay less tax in a pie. So the taxes that you do pay are on New Zealand and Australian shares. In a pie, you're taxed on the dividends, but not on the gains or losses.
Because dividends is basically they're giving you cash.
That's right.
Yeah.
But actually, when it's New Zealand shares, a lot of those dividends are imputed dividends, which means the company has already paid tax on that money, so you don't actually pay any more. So in many ways, New Zealand shares and KiwiSaver often are pretty much tax-free. The gains that you get on them turn out to be pretty much tax-free. Aussie shares not so, because while they've got an equivalent to imputation, it doesn't apply to New Zealand shareholders. And other overseas shares, apart from Australia, comes under the fair dividend regime, and basically you're paying tax on 3% of the share value, which is very controversial. In some years you're making a much bigger gain than that, and in other years you're making much more dividends than that.
3% or 5%?
5% of the share value is the tax.
Seems very high.
Yeah, although in a lot of years in overseas shares, you'll get a bigger gain than 5% on the shares, if you see what I mean.
But if you only got a 5% gain, does that mean you're paying all of your gains in tax?
In tax, yes, and some years there's a loss, and you're still paying 5%. It's a controversial
Sort of a disincentive to invest overseas, isn't it?
Well, yes, but the reason it's there is because overseas shares tend to pay lower dividends than New Zealand shares. New Zealand shares are pay unusually high dividends. In America, a company, or not just America, or the rest of the world, company is more likely to keep more of the profits and reinvest them in the growth of the company instead of paying it out in dividends. And it's sort of historically just been that way. New Zealand companies tend to pay more dividends. And because of that, when the government decided to set up pies, and they thought, well, we'll tax dividends but not gains, and we won't give any tax losses, they said it's not really fair because overseas shares are getting an advantage in that sense because they put more into profits and less into dividends. And I feel like I'm talking over the heads of a lot of people here. I think a lot of listeners' eyes are going to be glazing over. So I hope not. But we won't continue on this topic for too much longer. But I actually think it's not that unfair when you look at it over the long term, but I know a lot of people don't like it, and I think there has been some talk of the government changing those rules. I'm not sure about that, but the fact is it's still a really good idea to be in a KiwiSaver fund that's got a lot of overseas shares. You still come out well ahead of what you would do in a lower risk fund on average over time. So and on bonds, the tax on bonds is on both the interest that you earn and on any gains in bonds. When, as we've said before, gains in bonds happen when interest rates have fallen, we won't go into all of that again.
No, let's
but
not.
The value of bonds go up and down, and so if the value has risen, then you're going to get taxed on that gain. If it's fallen, then you get a tax deduction on that gain. And then we've got cash, which many KiwiSaver funds hold at least some cash, and that's taxed on the interest. So look, for those of you who've been listening to this last bit and said, I can't follow all of that, basically your KiwiSaver is taxed, but it's taken care of by your provider. They are calculating what tax you owe and sending it into Inland Revenue for you, so you don't need to worry about it. And suffice to know that it's a reasonably good tax rate overall that you're being taxed on that.
Thank you. You got a quick mention of something happening this week?
Yeah, yes, it's Wills Week. Public Trust is calling this Week of Wills, of writing wills. And the main point I wanted to make is that they say only about half of adult New Zealanders have a will. And I'm sure it's more among older people, but just to urge even people in their 20s to get a will, because unfortunately you never know what's going to happen, and you want to have some say in where your money goes, even if it might just be a car. Or you might not own much at all, but you want to have some say in where it goes, and you can make a will pretty cheaply and easily online. There are websites that will help you set up wills. Public Trust is also making a point that not many New Zealanders give to charity in wills. They said only 7% of people of the people that do wills through Public Trust give to charity, and which surprised me. But I suspect Public Trust probably tends to do people without huge amounts of wealth, and it's the richer people who probably tend to give more to charities. But it's quite nice. I've got in my will, fairly small amounts to some of the charities I really like, and I like to think that somebody will be kind of happy when they get a few $1,000s tossed their way. One more last point about wills. I was just thinking as I was driving, and I've left money to small amounts to nieces and nephews, and that stipulating they spend it on fun, because I've always thought that I'd love to get a legacy from someone that just said, Mary, here's $1,000 and you've got to spend it on fun.
Yeah, so they're on a roller coaster on the Gold Coast saying it's what Mary would have wanted.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Great
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Also, I've worked out about the confusion on my own KiwiSaver statement. I was looking at a provider that I used to have before I changed providers.
Oh, no wonder.
So I was trying to work out why all the money disappeared.
Oh.
Just because I changed providers. So false alarm.
Phew.
Thanks, Mary. It's great
Pleasure,
to have you in.
Jesse.
Mary Holm.